Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Marty Ginsberg from Reading Simplified, where we streamline reading instruction and accelerate students' reading achievement. And it's my honor to have Dr. Sharon Ware in the house from USJ. Thank you, Sharon, for being here.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. And Shannon is here, and she's switching to Facebook. Smart. We're also on YouTube. And Sherry can't wait to watch every replay. In fact, now that's what we're talking about. The Accelerate Literacy Summit has been going on since Sunday. So we're already in day 5, and there's one more day. Day 6 tomorrow is going to be another big one. We've got an advocate, Ernest Trey Hadrick, with the keynote tomorrow. He's done a TEDx talk. He's very passionate about getting literacy access for all. And there's other good talks, including Dr. Leslie Loud, who's the inventor, the creator of Think SRCD. Did I get those acronyms right? I think so. And
SRSD.
SRSD. Okay, thank you. Ugh. And then we're ending with a talk from many program providers, myself, Nora Shabazi from Ebley, John Walker from Sounds Right, and Dr. Stephen Trush from the Reading Foundation in Calgary. So tomorrow is another big day. And I just wanted to bring on Dr. Ware today because specifically she shared her experience teaching at the university level. And the goal of these chats is to just see what you thought. Maybe review a little bit about what went on today or what's gone on over the week, but also what questions do you have? Jennifer agrees that that will be a must-see session. Sweet. So what's been interesting about this week is that some people have been trying to make a case for a speech-to-print or structured linguistic literacy or linguistic phonics approach. And even Miriam Fine called it the Y-files. So we do have difficulty with names because we are coming from all over the world and there are different ways of looking at it. But we all kind of agree on the essence of what it is.
Right.
And in the midst of all that advocacy, this week, there haven't been that many that said, this is what you do. And Dr. Ware did that today, and it was super helpful. And then also Jennifer Sarah did it as well with a lot of video examples as well.
Yeah. She had wonderful videos.
Mm-hmm.
That was really helpful. I actually taught a class in between the last session and now, and I encouraged them all to watch her session.
Okay, so I'm dropping in the chat how to get into that summit if you haven't been in there yet. So tickets are free, and you can watch a session for 24 hours for free. If you can't make it within the 24 hours, then you can pay a little bit, pretty low cost for 35 sessions to watch at any time. So there it is in the chat. So how many of you got to see Dr. Ware's session? How many of you wish you had a university professor like that? I didn't learn these things in my undergrad, especially or mainly my master's. That's when I was trying to learn how to be a teacher.
Right.
So that's one thing I'd like to talk about. And then also, what's on your mind? What questions or things that have amazed you or confusion? Yeah, Karen says she was there. Sweet. So we're probably just warming up out there in social media land, Sharon. What has been some of the things that have struck you as you've watched this? We've never had an event like this in the world, as far as I know.
Hearing from so many different perspectives
Mm-hmm.
has been really important. I think my favorite still is Mark Seidenberg, because I think he makes a really important point that
Mm-hmm.
we're overteaching. I think I showed some examples of that overteaching in my
Mm-hmm.
presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of clutter out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that I think seeing how many people signed up for this really thrilled me.
Yeah, we're over 9,000 people now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to get the word out,
Mm-hmm.
it is code-based instruction.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing magic about it. It's just doing it the way the brain works. And
Hmm.
it's really hard to get that message out there. So
Yeah.
I thought it was great. I also I appreciated the presentation on research and sort of the ESSA,
Mm-hmm.
um, just how difficult it is for teachers to figure out what's going on and what,
Hmm.
so this kind of a summit, especially that's free
Yeah.
for short term, free. But I mean, think about that.
Yeah, you can't
You
go to many.
that's a lot of information, and I think it's funny. A number of my students think I gave them the free ticket.
It's just our little secret.
Okay,
And maybe you guys should give her a Starbucks gift card and as a thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, that was Dr. Rachel Schechter's talk today. Very powerful because
yes,
she's actually out in the thick of things doing research herself, and she pointed out, hey, we don't really have much. In the categories of that the in the US that we've blessed, these are your places you can go to see approved program. Well, it's a 1% was the
right,
IES What Works Clearinghouse, right?
right. It's just the reviews aren't getting done, and that's problematic.
Yeah, yeah. So, as Sherry says, Sharon, you're so generous. Okay, yeah, Jody agrees with his over teaching there, and I noticed that actually on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, all three of our keynotes use the word efficiency.
Yes,
Jody
yes.
says the overteaching may be a reaction to years of balanced literacy instruction. That pretty much nails it, I think. We're so
Oh, yeah.
afraid of being haphazard that we're overdoing it. It's a swing, as we always do in education, of the pendulum too far. Many of us were eager to correct. We now have overcorrected by infusing too much phonics instruction. And I think people who are in the thick of things and they see these scope and sequences, they're like, I'm not doing too much, and my kids aren't reading well, and so they probably hear us and we sound like a clanging gong. Like, it's really, you have to see it to believe it because, um, and again, to your point, Sharon, Dr. Seidenberg made that point so clearly. The strategy that has been adopted, we're going to teach the components, therefore the kids will learn to read. We're going to cover all those components. And he says, no, the
Right.
point is really to break the code. So give them the enough of those components, and in our case, we do it in the context of words, integrating all the things together. And so that breaks the code, and then they're off to the races, and implicit learning takes over.
Yeah. One of my students today stayed on after to talk about a student she will have next year who is in eighth grade and and reading at a very basic level.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about taking a speech to print approach. And one of the reasons that is so important, it is so much more respectful of someone of that age,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can switch it as a game
Mm-hmm.
and really instill the alphabetic principle. You
Mm-hmm.
can explain that this is a code we're going to teach,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a code. We're going to break the code. You have half the code. You have your sounds. Like you're halfway there.
Mm-hmm. And you
That's
know all
a
the
lot of
words
it.
too already, or
And
many of the words.
it just is, it is not in, and he doesn't need to know syllable types and doesn't
Mm-hmm.
need to know that you split things that are lion words or tiger words. It's just like, no, no, this is code. Let's learn the code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and reading simplified, we almost use no labels for our language with children. I don't even regularly use myself vowel or consonant, let alone close open syllable, diphthong, digraph. Um, Sometimes I might say the word schwa, but there's very little extra language or vocabulary or categories that I have to put on kids. I just say, "Oh, this is O." Put it together. Oh, yes, no, you did it. Good.
Well, I'm in an interesting spot because with my pre-service teachers and initial certification people, they have to pass foundations of reading.
Oh,
They
yes.
have to know the syllable types.
Oh my
They have to
gosh.
know the terms. They have to know those things.
Oh.
I have to, I basically say, this is for the test. This is how you teach.
Two separate categories.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw someone here mention Sherry, like so many, my master's was whole language. Same with my master's 2010, and which was my career changing to education. Sure wish I had someone like Dr. Ware. It took me years to figure out
Oh,
what was wrong. Yeah, it's just I mean, the water that we were swimming in was balanced literacy, and it's really good that the science of reading movement has come, and kids need to learn the code. But when we learn the code, let's not prioritize the minutia and the sub skills as much as we
right.
prioritize code cracking and getting into real reading. That's another thing Dr. Seidenberg said, right? Was that in this talk? I've been listening to a lot of
Really.
his things. He said, "Are we getting enough time for real reading?"
Yeah.
Dr. Snow's talk, yes.
No.
That was on
It was
Tuesday.
excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
giving students literacy helps protect them, make their lives better. She also talked about the cognitive science of learning. And in that context, she talked about the challenges of cognitive overload and the need for efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
sounds like Sherry. That was funny. Yes, taking the practice for reading and trying to guess what the answer should be according to them. Yeah, I did the same thing actually.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes.
by the time I took that test for reading specialist license, I already knew how to teach reading. But I was like, oh, I think they want me to say, no, don't you dare look at the inside parts of words and the phonics, because that would be bad.
No, look at the first letter and guess.
Yeah, that's obviously going to work. Same with Jennifer. Same problem in masters in 2009. Interesting timing. Yeah, and then yeah, thank you. We're so glad that we got connected. Um, Interesting here, Sherry. Jennifer Newman, one of the co-hosts of the summit, she stated that OG to structured linguistic literacy shift has been obscured by the bigger shift to structured literacy. Yeah, it's
Very
really
true.
important. Yeah.
Very true. Mm-hmm.
So, what kinds of challenges do you face besides, like, okay, your students are going to go out into the world with these um, differing belief systems, but what kinds of other pressures does a university professor experience?
You know, well, I commented this, I put this in the comments and didn't realize that my colleague was there, but I have tried for the past, this is our third year, to get him to investigate speech to print
Hmm.
and to try to stop him from teaching, that we have to label things with macrons and brevs um, and when you can't convince your own colleague, it's
Yeah,
tough.
yeah. Oh, I've been there, done that. I discovered how to teach reading in, I think, 2097, maybe
Yeah.
98,
Yep.
and I was like, nobody wanted to hear it. And I was like, look at this kid. He learned in a couple of months. Oh, and this kid learned in 6 weeks. People, even my teacher friends, not interested.
Not in, what was that? For me, I came from outside of education. The
Mhm.
first thing I learned was phonographics.
Wow,
And,
amazing.
and so then I got a master's in language and literacy. I got a PhD in special education and reading. And and I kept like, what's the matter with all these people?
Right, right. Well, it's twofold because there was this whole camp of balanced literacy, which dominated the literacy education part. I think in special education, that kind of had a little bit more normalcy and
Yeah,
actual
yeah,
based in the science. So it's closer. Like, yeah, you got to have phonics, you got to teach them the code, and even
yes.
phonemic awareness.
Mm-hmm.
But even within that domain, we're having these studies pop up, getting outstanding results. 2002, a brain scan of multiple kids with pretty significant dyslexia. They learned to read in 2 months, and it's crickets.
Yes, yes,
you
yes.
know and when we have 67% of American fourth graders that aren't proficient in reading, we should be like, what's going on there in that intervention? And it's just, Yeah, and not to mention that Dr. Diane McGinnis's book itself was a bit of a popular fad, but completely ignored by scientists.
Yeah, I even had one of my professors at Harvard said, "Be careful of that one." I'm like,
I've wondered about that because what do you think that meant? Um,
I don't know. I really don't know.
yeah. Well, I think people are saying that about me and some of this in this summit. I hope it doesn't spread to you. Um, but she was, I gather, she didn't suffer. What's the expression? Don't suffer fools. She was
Well,
very confident, and when men are very confident and they say bold things, people don't give them quite the same hard time they do
no,
women.
no, they become billionaires.
Yeah, they become billionaires. Yeah, yeah. So, no, not. I don't agree with everything she said. I think she overstated her dyslexia case in that chapter in Wire. Children can't read, but everybody has things that we're all books are a
It
work in
doesn't
progress.
take away from the validity of her logic
Yes,
and her analysis of the language.
right. 100%. And that was very eye-opening to me, actually, even recently when I reread it for a book study group. Because I had read it in the 90s and then I did, tutoring and I did doctoral work and university research. And I just had kind of knew it was an important book, but hadn't reread it. And then I reread it and I realized, oh, it's so obvious. Like, you teach the code the way the code was designed. Like, it's a code for sounds. So
Mhm, mhm,
organize it
mhm.
by sound, and I had been doing that for so long, and it does seem uh, implicitly obvious, but it is funny that that was missed, and still so many programs are just going to organize everything in a very bizarre, random way based on spelling, which may work for an illiterate person, but it doesn't work for the beginner.
Mhm, mhm.
So tell us a little bit more of your backstory, Sharon. You did say you learned phonographics early on. Did you have another career?
Yes. I was a chartered financial analyst.
Hmm.
So I worked,
Oh, can I go
from,
to you for some help on that too? I could use some help
oh
on that.
gosh,
Finances simplified?
I'm always getting that question, and I have to say, come on, that was a long time ago. Um, but yeah, I did research on companies.
Mm,
So I researched the financials and the business case of companies, and so what I think what that gave me was um, was a discipline for study and in a trust of like looking at data
mm-hmm,
and figuring things out. And
mm-hmm.
so, when a third grade teacher said, this is Cassius, um, he can't read. Take him to the library and model reading for him,
Oh, right.
right? That to me was just like, yeah, I don't think so,
Mm-hmm,
right? And so I think that I've really used a lot of my background in different ways in
mm-hmm,
this work, and probably what led me to spending a lot of time as a researcher
mm-hmm,
before I was a teacher of teachers.
mm-hmm. And what degree did you get at Harvard?
Master's in language and literacy
Oh, who did you
with
work with?
Catherine Snow,
Oh,
um, Noni Lasso.
mm-hmm.
Neither
Awesome.
of them were the ones that said, be careful of that one.
Okay,
Neither
good.
of them. They would know.
Yeah,
But
they're both very well regarded researchers, and Catherine Snow is the lead author on preventing reading difficulties for young children in 1998, one of the seminal documents that again showed us how we should teach reading. And it's more, and of course they emphasized a lot about language, but on the code side it was teach the code and connect it to phonemic awareness and real words, and draw on what kids already bring to the equation and consider their motivation. And that motivation is a really big point. Um, Here's a good question from Sherry. Why were you volunteering in the first place?
So Sherry, my son at the time was a student in the school, and we lived in a neighborhood where other kids went to the school, and one of the other moms was like the PTA director of volunteers. And she came up to me one day and said, "Would you volunteer?" And I said, "Of course, sure." And
Mm-hmm.
she sent me to Mrs. Miati's class. Um, within a year of her approaching me, um, I had been trained in phonographics. I was training other volunteers in phonographics. Um, I was by then the president of the PTA, that sort of took over. But that's what happened.
Awesome.
There
Well, I'm
you
glad
go.
I'm glad it happened. So we've both been kind of struck by the importance of Dr. Seidenberg's talk, partly because of his background. He is preeminent in understanding how the brain learns to read. Our models of reading come from his research. His
That's
book,
right.
Why Our Children, not Why Our Children, Language at the Speed of Sound or Sight, is a major catalyst of the science of reading movement. Emily Hanford went to him as a major guest, thinker to help her understand
Mhm.
this. So anyway, he's been revealing how the problems that we've had, and he also reveals the tragedy of balanced literacy, especially the three cueing component. So he's not
Mhm.
saying we don't need to teach the code. He's been beating that drum for a long time, and yet he's still saying let's not overdo it. And
Right. We don't have to label everything to death, name
mhm,
everything.
mhm,
I have found that reminding that you don't teach what you have to discard later,
mhm,
is an important
mhm.
analysis tool for my
Yes.
students to use when they look
Mhm,
at a curriculum,
mhm,
and how are they going to use it.
mhm. Now, can you give some examples of that? Sometimes we get so wrapped up in the way we know how to teach that it's hard to think about what would be something that's kind of classic in a phonics program. Obviously, a balanced literacy is not doing that enough,
Right.
right? But in a phonics,
Right. Well, one of the really horrifying things I see is teaching spelling with a program that is used widely here in Connecticut. And in this program, you have to first to spell the word, you have to identify the kind of syllable it is.
mm-hmm,
And so you mark it. So you would scoop, even with cat, you would scoop under it,
mm-hmm,
and then you would write a C that it's a closed syllable, and you
mm-hmm.
would put one of those little curvy things on the top. And I can never remember
And
which
whether it's
is the macron
breve or
and
brev
which is
or
the brev.
I think the macron is
Right?
the long vowel.
Okay. So the brev is the,
I think so, but
well, I'll
I don't
remember
use it,
that.
so I'm
Short
not an expert.
brevity. I'll try to use that. Um, but that kind of like interference and
Yeah.
cognitive clutter, that
Hmm.
cognitive clutter is so problematic.
Right. 100%. Okay, that's a really great example. Let's just see if we can make model it for anyone who's not already using this type of approach. So I agree. That's one of the things that frustrates me the most about multisyllable instruction. Like, it's already hard enough to read a long word. Let's not add extra steps. Let's get cut to the
Right.
chase. And so let's say the student is reading this in a book. Well, you can you can go find I'll hunt all the vowels. You can look at the end. You can you can create the syllable marks, or you can just help them. Well, read that first part. What do you have?
Right.
Okay, read and then put it together with that. What do you have now? Oh, remember, and what's left? Remember. Oh, okay, remember. On with the story. And the
Right.
thing I, of course, the teacher is doing that scaffolding, But guess what happens to the child's brain as we do it? They're getting better and better at seeing these chunks, the mem, the burr. They're getting better and better at doing this process themselves. And then the next time, I just hold this part to get them to do re, and then they can do the rest. And then
Yeah.
next time I'm out of it entirely. And maybe they say, remember. And I thought, well, what else could this be? And eventually I'm out of the story altogether. And that eventually often happens in hours and days, not months and years, instead
Yes.
of learning whether you're supposed to slash and scoop.
Well, yeah, slash and scoop, and what if, I mean, kids who are taught closed syllables are going to see REM.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
That doesn't really help with remember. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
And then you're backing them up from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
It's
had
very,
one Orton Gillingham trained tutor come to me. She grappled with the way I was teaching her. She was actually one of our earliest students to read Simplified, and a family friend. So there have been a few friends that I've persuaded, but she finally said, you know what happens is when we get to a word where the closed open doesn't work, they still have to flex it and try another sound. So why don't we just start with that instead of adding extra layers? Because we know we're going to have to get there anyways. We all know that even the best rule that's the most reliable still fails the student. So they have to have a second strategy. So let's go straight to the jugular. Get that strategy learned early.
the most powerful thing with that is what other sound can it be?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
it can't, it's not like OW can be anything in God's
Right.
green earth,
Right.
right? What's the
Right.
other one?
Mm-hmm.
And really letting them trust themselves. I mean, someone just said, I've had students read that as rem ember and then change the first to the long E. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to tell them. You're absolutely right. They'll
Mm-hmm.
say remember. Well, yes, that's remember, isn't it?
Right.
Remember.
Right. And that's why Dr. Seidenberg's work with the triangle model,
Oh,
um,
God.
you've got, and that was one thing that you shared too. So helpful. And I love how you're saying you're tying all of your instruction back to that model.
Yeah.
Um, so we've got the semantic or the meaning, the phonology or the sound, and the orthography or the spelling. This is all interacting. And so when that child reads remember, guess what's activated? This is activated. Oh, I know something close to that. I'm going to flip the sounds and pull out. Oh, it's not remember, it's remember. And so it's
Right.
so powerful because we have allowed their brain to access this word bank instead of
Mm-hmm.
making their brain think about, well, it is it looks like a closed syllable, so I should say the short sound. So I should, like a stream of of an algorithmic number of steps, and instead they're just going to straight to their their vocabulary
Well,
bank.
that's why we have to get all those words in too. I
Yes,
mean,
yes,
the
yes.
language we use has to be good. It has to be a lot. There has to be
Mm-hmm.
a lot of read aloud. There has to be a lot of speech because
Right,
all those words have to get in there,
right.
right? Because if you don't know what a cot is, you're going to get a trampoline.
Yeah, you got to go check out Dr. Ware's session today. I'm going to drop it in the chat again. If you haven't seen it, you'll have a few more hours to catch it for free. It's at the Accelerate Literacy Summit, and you witnessed that with your own eyes, right? A little girl struggling to
Oh,
read the
yes.
word
Oh,
caught, and
yes.
she finally read it. Or no, she said the sounds, but it was
Yeah, it was,
meaningless to her because
yeah.
and then she said trampoline. It must have been the picture made her think of that, which is clever,
It
you
was.
know?
Yes, I mean, it did look like a
We
trampoline.
don't
I mean,
use
it
the
wasn't
word caught.
round, but it was,
Hmm.
stretched
Yeah,
out bouncy thing. I don't know.
yeah. Okay. People are giving us a lot of validation. I think we're preaching to the choir here.
Yes, we
If there's any questions or comments, things that we should bring up, let us know. And I think what Sherry, actually, we have another Sherry here. I happen to know that her business is Gather to Learn, and she says that all those rules can just suck the life out of reading, right?
Yes.
And I like this
Yeah.
point, Jody. Oral language is key because that's what we fall back on when we're checking our decoding. Yeah, I have this
That's
great
right.
little video of a boy reading the word patriot. He's reading a nonfiction book about Hamilton. I think it's Hamilton, and he comes to the word patriot, and first he says patri. No, first he says something kind of outlandish. He was always kind of a guesser, and so that's what you do when you see a word you don't know, and it's a lot of syllables. But I finally get him to, with just like slowing him down and covering things up, like I just showed you.
Mhm.
He came up with patriot, and I didn't say anything, and he said, "Oh, patriot," and
Bingo.
and I said, which is flex it, as Melody said earlier, and then I said, "Do you know what that means?" And he said, "No." So I think that's just really cool example of that word is rattling around in his
In
phonological
his
memory.
head. Yeah, he's heard it. He's
Hmm.
heard it. That's what
And
he
that's
needed.
enough to get him the correct pronunciation. And then it's our job as a teacher to fill in the vocabulary. Oh, you know that video. Yeah, I like that one. And it happens a lot. Once you get into that third, fourth, fifth grade level where there's a lot of multisyllable words, they're inevitably going to encounter words that they don't know. And so, yeah, the flexing is harder, but um, it's easier than the alternative of either making a guess or trying to skip ahead. I really don't like to skip ahead. That's one thing that Dr. Kern said with the peeling off strategy. And I know there's some research behind that, but I think I want my students to be going left to right through the words all the time and not skip to the end. I mean,
Me
maybe
too.
if you're like really stuck and then, or if you're doing a spelling thing, but if you're trying to read words, I always want you left to right, left to right, left to right.
Mhm.
Okay, so one more day left, you guys, for this fabulous summit, Accelerate Literacy. We're super excited about it. You can still invite people, even if they can't get into for free. It's only $97 for 35 talks from over 50 people, experts and passionate practitioners from all over the world, talking about something that doesn't get a lot of airtime. And we're talking about teaching really quite efficiently. And along the lines of the summit, which I dropped the link soon, just recently, I mean, I can't really be there too much tomorrow. So I need some of my simplifier faithfuls to come out and just be cheering for the cause. Taking my daughter, our middle daughter has graduated college, and I'm helping her move to her first post college job, new town, going all the way to Florida. So
Oh my goodness. What is
it's
she
exciting.
going to do?
She's going to go into a training program for Lockheed Martin, and she's learning how to do operations. She's had actually strange to tell, she's been very interested and developed a lot of skill in operations and administration since she was 16. So, um, yeah, Sherry, that's my personal opinion. That's my opinion about directionality from clinical um, experience. I don't think we have a lot of research on this versus this versus this versus this. Like we just haven't gotten to that level, and so I think it's Dr. Kearns was perfectly right in saying that this is a robust finding from research. But I just think we kind of have a dearth of research on different multisyllable strategies.
I think yes, a comparative research would be helpful with that.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Catherine asks about what we think about
Hmm.
Anita Archer's
Hmm.
multisyllabic decoding strategy.
Hmm.
It is head and shoulders above the other
Amen.
stuff that's out there, right?
Yes.
Um, and I and I find it a very like the flexible strategy for reading big words, which is like peeling off. It's recognizing the prefix, the suffix, and then going for the middle of the word. That I've seen that be extremely effective,
Yeah.
and there is really a lot of research support
Hmm.
um,
Agreed.
for that. There really is good research support for it, and it really ties in well. Um, we, at least when I learned phonographics, we teach Sean as a unit.
100%. So do we at Reading Simplified. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I find that it does well, and it also gives an opportunity to weave in the meanings, right, and to start to look at prefixes and suffixes and morphology level, like layer of our language.
Yeah. Trying to, let's see if I can get, oh, there we go. Yeah. So inside our academy, we pretty early on talk about, in the intro, we get into our scope and sequence, which we call the streamlined pathway. I'm going to find it here. I think my Chrome browser marks everything out that I've already done. It's kind of annoying. So yeah, here are our streamlined pathways. And by first grade, we're going to take 12 levels, 12 steps, and then we'll be in that level where, like phonographics, I learned that from them and I appreciate it. They're now past that phoneme level and that they can see larger chunks. So we do teach shun and ol, leel, ul,
Mhm, mhm.
ed, and then of course we get into prefixes like re and un, high frequency. That's what we're doing here for in the Reading Simplified context. We're teaching high frequency affixes. They're
Mhm.
reading them and writing them. So they'll
Yeah,
say
yep.
prefix
I've done your
and
training, Marnie. Yes. And I love it.
thank you.
Yes.
So when there's still a place for totally a place for looking at those larger chunks of words, and I think some balanced literacy programs wanted to skip ahead to that type of analysis, and even some phonics programs that want to do the onset rhyme. I think sure, onset rhyme is fine if the kids have a strong sound-based decoding foundation, but don't use it as a way to teach them how the code works, because as Diane McGinnis told us, that's not how it works. It's a
I had a student who, in his teaching, in his clinical work, he was working with a student who could not segment three sounds.
mm,
And he got her to three sounds by starting with onset rhyme.
who's that
But
again?
this was one of my teacher
Oh,
candidates.
okay, okay, yeah.
And, it was during the pandemic, and
Hmm.
so we couldn't go as a group into a school, but he
Yeah,
was working at a school, so he
right.
taped what he was doing, and he only did it to get her to do sort of stay with words, whole words, and
Yeah.
meaningful words, but she could only isolate the first sound and then the rest. And
Okay.
then and then he worked it to where she took the first sound off the last two,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Good.
But it took a couple weeks before she could
Interesting.
really do
Yeah.
three sounds. And some kids are like that, right? There's a question here about how much we teach to dyslexic students, right? And
Mm.
um, I would say I always teach multiple spellings, right?
Hmm.
I of a sound, and I worry less that I'm overwhelming with like four sounds to spell the A,
Hmm.
right? I worry less about that because that's the reality in any book. They're going to, and so I worry more that their experience trying to read is going to show them way more than I gave them
Hmm.
and so I need to give it to them,
Yeah.
right? And support them in using it. And there are really a lot of ways to support that. AI usually in the middle of words, usually at the end, some patterns you can point out to kids who are really struggling.
Hmm. And that, I mean, that concept arose for me when I was listening to Dr. Snow on Wednesday talk about schema. And it's
Yes.
schema that allows us to get new information to be learned. So I'm presenting the schema of this is how the code works. There's the A sound, and these are the various spellings that we're going to see a lot. They get to stick. Also, I
I,
really loved how Nikki Pratty framed it as like that visual of moving into a new house and you label the box kitchen, bathroom, and that's all
Yeah.
we're doing from the very first step. Put this in the kitchen. And then, oh, okay, so that information gets absorbed whether in reading and writing. There's a place for it to go. I mean, I put often in my presentations, like, it's a file folder that we just want to
Right.
build in the brain, which is
Yes.
schema to me. That's my mental, that's my schema for schema. I like this message, Sherry, and I'm pretty confident because I see kids learn to read so quickly, but also I have to stay humble because the research is not all nailed down, and there may be even faster ways. So we need to be not too prescriptive. I think we're being an open-minded crew, especially since most of us taught whole language for years. We need to stay humble about what we think we know. That is a good word for everyone, especially in education. Well, probably any field. It's so common for people to get entrenched in us, them, black and white thinking, and very little in science, especially fits that bill.
Well, and I think also we have to remember that everybody who has worked in reading, including the balanced literacy people,
Hmm.
everybody has the same goal, which
Right.
is to help all children become literate. And
Yeah.
nobody set out to do something bad, right?
Right.
Some of it was bad,
Yeah.
but they didn't set out to, like, they set out with a good heart.
Hmm.
And so we need to be humble. Absolutely, we
Yeah.
need to be humble.
Well, and I think again back to your point about language, that's one of the things that's so concerning about spending so much time in isolated practice for teaching this strand of phonics and this strand of phonemic awareness and this strand maybe of labeling and morphology, when you're in first grade or something like that. It's going to detract from the read alouds and the student reading. Those are the things that are going to give them the language skills that are going to be in desperate need, especially starting in fourth grade and beyond. Well,
Yes.
I think we should wrap it up. I want to make sure you guys know that the summit is still out there, but also we're having an outrageous sale for the academy. Don't want anyone to have any reason to not join. Because we're giving away what's really worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for just 7 days at $9.97. And then if you stick around, it's only $39, which is also a very low price. So I get people from all over the world who say I can't afford it. And I get the exchange rate can be pretty bad, but almost anyone can jump in for 7 days at that price. And even if you have to stay an extra month or two, it's still going to be well under $100. And you could learn to teach anyone to read. I spent $26,000 on my master's and did not learn. Um, so this is a good deal. But
Yes.
don't mistake the low price for low value. Our mission is to disseminate this widely. I had lots of great studies that I was a part of that are still mostly collecting dust. They are on the IES What Works Clearinghouse, and you've never seen it talked about in the newspaper. Nobody's buying it for districts. It's really a dissemination game, and so that's what we're doing here at Resimplify. We want to get more people having access. Um, and so, unfortunately, right now, that means a lot of teachers are paying for it themselves, but we also have schools for sure that are paying for it as well.
Marnie, thank you for taking this instruction and putting it into such a user-friendly
Mm,
package,
mhm.
because as you know, I've had
Yeah.
some of my master's students do that training,
Mhm.
and it really gives them the tools to go and use it easily
Mhm.
without having to reinvent everything and create everything. And,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, a lot of what takes up teachers' time is like just exhausting, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so they'll stick with their XYZ curriculum because they have the stuff, and it doesn't,
Yeah.
I mean, teachers have busy lives.
Yeah. And there's
So,
no there's
so
no
thank
prep
you.
time.
Thank you for making that
Yeah.
accessible.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's our mission. Teachers still have to learn the system, so they have to do a little bit of training, but it's only 9 hours, and along the way we recommend you actually work with a student. It's the best learning. I was at a conference just recently listening to Kareem Weaver talk about his concerns, and he's a very strong literacy advocate. You can probably find him on Twitter, if maybe other places as well, trying to get the field to change. And one of his points is, we're given curricula that are just, fill up a whole desk, and then the school is giving the teacher maybe 45 minutes once or twice a week to do their prep. These things do
Yeah.
not add up. you cannot. And he's like, I've got these 10 books. And he said when he went to talk to a curriculum provider, they asked for his feedback, and he said he looked at all their stuff after they showed him this new thing and this feature. And he says, that's divorce in a box. Because he actually experienced that. He was trying to get to his students, and it took him so much work to just trudge through all the materials, and then that was a harm for his marriage. That's a really extreme circumstance, but it does just goes to show. And publishers are like, okay, this state asked for this state asked for that, and I get it. And the more, the better. It seems like that's how America runs. Look at our grocery stores; it's out of control. How many
The more
flavors?
is better. The more is better. You know what?
Yeah.
The more efficient and effective we can
Mm-hmm.
be in teaching, the better for our
Right.
students.
Yes. Let's leave with that word. I love efficiency as that a thread throughout this summit. So
Yes. Yes.
I'm really honored that we got to talk, Sharon. I hope maybe some other time we can come on and talk again. It was a privilege to
I
hear
would
from
love
you
that.
today. And I know people they're so probably encouraged to hear that a university professor is teaching this way, and that you're super knowledgeable. And I personally am really intrigued, because I never got to do that as teach this approach in academia. So yeah, we'll have you back. But right
Yes,
now we
we
need
could
to give
get
you.
you for some of our online classes.
I would love that. Sign me up.
All
Sign me up.
right.
Yeah. So that it's been a long week for both Sharon and I, and some of you. Thank you for being so faithful to the summit. Keep watching. And good point, Jennifer. I'll just squeeze this in. She can plan all of her groups for the week in less than an hour. She's got 70 plus
Yes.
students as an
Yes.
intervention, so she can't dawdle with her planning. All right. Thank you all for being